Hello and welcome to this special episode of Model Railroading 101. In this episode, I want to talk to you about insurance for model railroads. I think we've all heard about unfortunate things happening to friends and acquaintances that involved the loss of some or all of their models, and in some cases, even their entire layout. Now, we all know that models and model layouts can represent countless investments of time, and in some cases, even a sentimental attachment that comes from being given a model by a friend who's no longer with us, for example, or maybe a section or a part of a layout that was worked on by a friend who moved away, that kind of thing. Now, there's no way to insure those emotional attachments, but your model collection almost certainly has a monetary value that's fairly easy to document. My friend Adam Pinales from Utah experienced a flood in his basement early this year that resulted in a significant loss of train models, and he learned a lot about insurance. I thought that his experience could help everyone who might be interested in learning, so I asked him if he would share it with you, my audience. He agreed, so I recorded a conversation with him recently, and let's go to that now so you can hear Adam's story. Okay, so I have Adam dialed up online now. Hello, Adam. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And we're here to talk about your experience with your amazing flood that you had. Why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and what happened?
My name's Adam Pinales. If you don't know me, I work for Amtrak as a conductor out of Salt Lake City on the California Zephyr. In my free time, I run a custom model building, decoder installation, sound business called Prospector Models. We specialize in brass, custom work, and DCC installs, paint, and so forth. And in earlier this year, my whole basement flooded. So I got a crash course on insurance and how that applies with your models. If you're a model railroader, how that can affect you or how that can hurt you.
Right?
So fortunately I was able to. I came out okay. Everything was great, and so I kind of figured that it'd be nice for other people to know what to do and what to expect, and if something horrible like that happens to you.
So I have a question. Let's go back to the fateful day. When this terrible event happened. What were you doing, and how did you find what was there?
So I was in Grand Junction, Colorado, on one of my layover trips, and my wife called me and said, "Hey, the downstairs bathroom is acting weird. Like my daughter Peyton, she was down there. She said it plugged. She gets to the toilet, got plugged, and she couldn't. She was trying to plunge it, couldn't do it. My daughter's 15. I don't think she'd ever actually plunged the toilet. So I was like, just shut the water off to the toilet. I'll take it. I'll take care of it when I get home." And so the next day, I get home about 3 in the morning, and I go downstairs to look at it for a second just because I was curious. And sure enough, it was plugged, and I was tired, so I was like, you know what? It's waited this long. I'll just take care of it. Get some sleep, and I'll come back and take care of it. So I woke up, a few hours later, and I walked down to start working on it, and I started plunging on it myself, and realized that there's something different about this one. This one's not acting the same. Like I don't even know how to explain it. Like it was, you could plunge on it for a minute, and you could flush it, it would go down, but it would come right back up. I mean, it acted like it worked, but then it just filled back up. Anyway, so I was like, I went up and told my wife Jenny. I said, I think probably ought to just call a plumber from this one. I was like, I didn't want to deal with it. It's like I am pretty handy and I can do a lot on my own, but if it doesn't cost a whole lot, I'd much rather have somebody else deal with it. And so she agreed. She's like, yeah, let's just get somebody down here. I'm like, all right, cool. So I left it. So my wife goes and jumps in the shower, right? And I guess that excess amount of water from the shower just completely backed everything up. So she gets out of the shower, and we're getting ready to go for the day. And I went downstairs to, I don't know, probably to make sure all my shop was turned off, and so I don't burn the house down. And when I got downstairs to the basement, there's water every. I mean, it was weird because I have a hardwood floor in the basement, and it's a darker color. So just looking down there, it didn't look like anything. But when I got down there, I realized there was like 2 inches of water, and not just water. It was gross water. God, like straight sewage. I was like, whoa. And
Yeah, sorry,
so
I'm not laughing because
oh,
of your misfortune. I'm
it's
laughing because the way you're telling it is kind of funny.
yeah. Well, it was. I just ran right down there, and it was like, well, I looked at it, and I'm like, oh God, this is not good. My wife is gonna freak out. She's a pretty clean freak, and so I yelled up at her, and I said, hey, we got a project. And so she come running down and saw it, realized it, smelt it, and said, "Oh hell no, no." She goes, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out what I'm going to do, how I'm going to start getting this taken care of, And I realize at this point that it's not just like in the hallway; it's down in the railroad room, it's in the shop, it's in my son's room, it's everywhere. It's the whole basement. And so she said, fortunately, she grew up with a guy that runs a company called Serve Pro, which is a fire, flood, natural disaster restoration cleanup place. So she immediately called him, and I was thank God too, because I was like, you know what, it's probably a good idea. I guess we have insurance, where I'm gonna find out what really that's all about. So she gave him a call. They showed up, and they had the basement stripped, all the flooring, 24 inches of sheetrock up from the floor up. I mean, everything. They just assembled the basement and had fans going on by midnight. So that was pretty cool. I mean, they got to it pretty quick and took care of it. But then came the insurance thing, and that's when I started. I mean, I was just sitting there looking around and realizing how much it affected my, all my models, because at the time I was getting ready to, just so happen, and it was just crazy enough that I was getting all my N scale stuff. I decided that I was going to do something different. So I started taking the railroad down, boxing everything up. So I had all the railroad, my whole railroad models and all boxed up and on the ground, because I was just stacking things up and getting ready to move things and put things away and, redo the room. And so I realized that all these boxes of N scale trains are sitting in water.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost it. That's when I finally lost it, and got all upset and screamed and yelled for a minute or two, and then felt bad, and then realized, well, like I said, I guess we're just going to see what insurance does. We'll go from there, and and then the process started.
I would think at that point you're probably just like, well, what can you do, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
what can you do? At that point, I mean, you can sit there and get. And I don't. This isn't no life lesson for anybody, because if anybody's going to learn a life lesson, it should be me. But I getting completely mad and freaking out is my first reaction, which I did, and then it's like, why do that? There's nothing I can do about it. It is what it is. So, I'm not the one to be teaching life lessons by any means, but here's my experience. Don't freak out. There's nothing you can do about it. It's like,
well, I mean, I could see if that happened to me, I'd be mad at myself for putting the stuff on the floor, but you don't know what's going to happen. I mean,
yeah,
what are you supposed to do?
What do you do? What do you do? It's like, I'm trying to take this apart in a semi-organized fashion, and I'm doing it. And it's like, I've been in this house. I rebuilt this house 3 years ago, a complete restoration, and I haven't had zero problems for 3 years. Why would I assume that this day is going to be the day that the whole basement floods? You
Right.
know? So, like I said, I mean, of course you're going to be mad. It's all your stuff. I mean, this is my N scale collection was 10 years, 15 years of collecting and money. And yeah, that all goes through your head. It's like, oh my gosh, I know how much I've spent. I know how much money's down here. I know that I don't know how much there is now. I mean, where are we at? So it's a little bit of coming to terms with everything you've worked on and built and painted and spent all this time now is underwater. So
Yeah, especially if you've done all the work custom like you do. So
yeah.
So you go to call the insurance company then, huh? Fast forward to that, and what happened with that? Like, what was your experience calling them?
Well, like at first it was, you call the insurance company, start telling them what's happening, and they start asking you a bunch of questions. It's like, okay, well, they ask you questions like, all right, how did it flood? What kind of water is it? Because with the flood, there's three different types of flood. They call them category 1, 2, and 3, and category 3 is when it is more than just your own waste in the basement. So it's like pretty much backup from the sewer, and at that point they got to kind of investigate who's at fault, and when they say fault, it's like, where did it come from? Your house, or did it come from the city, which is this, the sewer. We'll get into that in a second, but they just ask you a bunch of questions. Then they ask you, well, have you called anybody? Is anybody on their way? And then you let them know, yeah, okay, for us, in our case, it was ServPro. Yeah, we've got ServPro on their way. And then from there, they kind of just start dealing with them, because they're the ones that come and start fixing it up. So in all reality, you really don't have a whole lot of interaction after the first call, until you start getting the claim stuff in. It's like at that point they start really like dissecting what was damaged, what was here before, what happened, and at that point that just takes a few days. But then you got to start really like getting into your loss. What did you lose? Because at the end of the day, insurance is just going to replace you, bring you back to whole. They're not.
Right.
They're not going to obviously pay you for having a flood. They're not going to pay you for, you know, they're just going to bring you back to where you were pre-flood. And that's what you got to. That's what I had to realize. It's like, okay, well, this got damaged, this got damaged, this got damaged. It's like, well, this was damaged before the flood, so we're not going to replace that. But this part was damaged with the flood, so we will replace that. I mean, it's really funny because there's certain things that they will give away the farm on, and then there's really small trivia things that's like, no, we're not touching that. Well, okay, it's like you'll spend $5,000 on this, but you won't spend $10 on that, and it doesn't make sense. But there's certain little things like that is kind of frustrating. But at the end of the day, it's they do get you back to where you need to be. You can definitely plan on about 2 or 3 months of a whole process, just because it's one person after another coming into the house and fixing this and fixing that, and they all have to go through the contractor at that point, which is ServPro, and then they have to go through the insurance. So it's kind of there's two middlemen,
Uh-huh.
and it's everybody has to match up, and you're sitting there telling them, hey, this is what I need. They go back and ask if it's okay. They go back and ask, yeah, we have money for this. Then that comes right back, and then it gets done. So it's a process. It's definitely a process.
So, did you find that your collection or your loss was covered under your homeowner's insurance?
So it's at first I thought, like, I've always been told or thought that collections should have a separate rider on them, so they should be they should be defined. And that was one of the first things I started talking about, because we lost a lot of stuff. My son's room and my daughter's room, they lost a lot of electronics and stuff like that. And that stuff's super easy to deal with. That stuff's cut and dry. This is what it is. This is what it's worth. They replace it. And in all reality, that kind of stuff, they don't even pay you for. They just buy you a new one. And it ships to your house.
Oh, okay.
But with stuff like this, your models and such, it's like I said, I always thought that it would be best to have a separate rider, is what they call it. So it's kind of like, we have insurance over the whole house, but this is what I have in addition to, and this is the value of it, and it's all descriptive. So you have it all listed out, photographs and descriptions and a price. Then that's fine to do. But it definitely there's pros and cons to doing this. I thought that that's what I was going to have to do, or have to have had, for it to be covered, but that's not the case. The insurance company prefers riders, and like I said, I'm going to talk about my insurance company. Every insurance company is a little bit different, so you definitely got to read the fine print, because it's all in there. Everything's in there, and so when you're getting insurance and you have something like this, it's really important to make sure that this is how it is for you, that you don't need a rider for this type of stuff, and it's not considered personal property. Personal property is just anything inside your house. And the way it was described to me by my insurance agent, because he's the one I called after I talked to the insurance and I didn't really understand what they were talking about. I called my agent, the guy that sold me the policy, and started talking to him, and he really broke it down to me and said, okay, well, a rider is for things, or is designed for things that are likely to be stolen.
Okay.
And the reason that is the way it is because it's really easy to say, well, somebody broke into my house and stole X amount of guns or jewelry or coin collection or, something like that. Those are things that riders are really designed to be, according to him, because it's hard to prove you had it to begin with. And so documenting it, where it came from, what it is, things of extreme value that are highly collectible and highly stolen. The stolen part is the key for a rider. If it's a high theft item, that you should really consider a rider for that. Model trains aren't considered a high theft item in a personal home, so they fall under what they call personal property. And what he described as restitution for personal property is if your house was to have burned down and it was a complete loss, the house is automatic, depending on your insurance policy, the house is, your personal property is covered up to the value of the house.
Oh,
So if you had, a $500,000 house, you automatically have a $500,000 worth of personal property. So anything after that, you would have to definitely have, documentation and proof on and everything like that. But I definitely didn't have a $500,000 with model trains.
some guys though, right? Some guys
Oh,
do,
yeah.
right?
Oh
So-
yeah. Like I said, everybody's situation is going to be different. And that's what's that. I'm describing mine. I'm talking about mine. Mine's not going to be yours by any reason, but it's definitely a good thought process. It should kick off the thought process. Is like, oh, maybe I should look into this. Maybe I should make sure I have this. Take your situation and apply this to yourself. If you have more model trains than your house is worth, absolutely, you better have a really good documentation of everything. If you're covered, if your model trains and layout and everything that is worth to you less than your house, then you're probably okay with just running with a personal property claim, depending on how your insurance policy is structured.
Right.
So fortunately for me, I didn't have to have all that documentation of every piece of equipment that I had, or model, or photos, or anything like that. I would say, like, now thinking about it, if you have a large layout in your basement, most people have that pretty well documented, just because that's one of the reasons they build a layout, is to take photos and share it, and so they're pretty well documented as is. But the better documented you could have something like that, because what is the layout worth? I mean, if this, for me, my layout was already in pieces and coming out, so it really wasn't worth anything to begin with. But all my models definitely were. So having a layout, I mean, that's time and money, and I mean, that could be worth a lot of money in the long run.
It's probably even hard to make an estimate of something like that, I would think.
Yeah, how can you?
Unless you logged your hours in a book or something, right?
Yeah, and I don't know how that would be covered. I mean, that's definitely something. I mean, that would be definitely something a rider or something like that would be defined. You would define that, because a rider, you can insure anything for whatever value you want. You're just going to pay for it.
Oh yeah. The insurance companies will take your money, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. You can insure, whatever you want for whatever you want. You just got to pay for that insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, you define it, you put a value on it, and then you pay for the insurance to cover it.
Right.
And they'll happily do that for you. For me, thankfully, the personal property clause, or personal property, however it was described, definitely is what came into effect for me, and it was definitely okay. And how that works is, I mean, they pretty much send an adjuster out, and they take a look at everything, and for me, everything was just in boxes stacked up in another room, and it was obviously had water damage and such. So they did, well, what's in that? What's in this? What's in this? And I told them, and and the adjustment comes in a weird space too, because the adjuster comes down, they measure your house, what's damaged, so they know how much sheetrock they need, how much flooring they're going to need, how much carpet, that kind of stuff. But then they also look at the basic personal property stuff. But he's not really the guy that even does that. He just says, okay, well, yeah, we'll cover that, and this will be covered. So he puts up a write up to ServPro and says, this is how much money we're going to cover for your services to restore this to bring me pre-flood.
Right.
Another guy calls me up and starts talking about personal property, and he sends you a paper that you got to fill out, and that's when the work begins. And this is where it's probably really important to document everything you have, and for everybody that has a photo and a description and a spreadsheet of your inventory, you're already ahead of the curve. Like, you're already ready for something like this. I tried to at one time, but I mean, I have over 1,000 pieces. I had over 1,000 pieces of rolling stock, and to have that. I mean, it's easy to do it once you bring it into your house. Set it down, set it in a pile, get it photographed, put a little description in, enter it in your computer, and you're done. If I would have done that, it would have been no big deal. But to sit down and do that now is that's overwhelming. That's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? It's not overwhelming for me. It's overwhelming for them too, because this is it worked out in my favor to where I told them, hey, this is what I've got. This is what's sitting here. You're more than welcome to come look at it. And that adjuster, the personal property adjuster, finally decided, okay, well, why don't you just take a picture of the whole lot, like everything as just stacked up right there, and give me a list of, write down what's there. And even that was just daunting, so I was like, okay, well, I've got 150 Trainworks Gons. I've got, 500 miscellaneous microtrains cars, and I just put an average price on them. Like, I didn't want to sit there and pull every single one out to figure out how much they were going to cost each one. And so I'd put an average price on the microtrains car, a high and a low, and went with that. Say there's 500 of them at this price. And at the time he looked at the list and asked, well, I need to make sure that this is going to be acceptable, and I guess he sent it to his boss, and because he said either I'm going to have to come out and we're going to have to take a picture of everything, or maybe I can just take a picture of the whole lot. I guess he asked his boss, and his boss said, you know what, we're just going to go with this. Because I told him, I said, look, man, it's probably in your best interest to go with it this way, because I'm giving you an average price of everything. If we come back and we have to spend the time to take every piece out, photograph it, if we're doing that much, I'm going to give you an actual price, because the price is right on the bottom.
They're going to find out it probably costs a lot more that way.
You're going to find out that it's going to cost you a lot more money than just going with a quick average price. And from there, and I think that probably spurred him a little bit and said, you know what, this is probably sufficient.
It sounds like at that point you're pretty much done. You're just like, I just want to get this over with, right?
Yeah. By that point, I was spent, man, because I was working, I was still going out of town, I was still trying to deal with this.
Right.
I was still lost on this whole thing. I was still trying to figure it all out and how this is going to work. And I mean, there's always that fear in the back of your mind that they're just going to say, here's a couple $100 for your stuff, and walk away. And
for your $20,000 collection.
right. That's there's always that fear, and so I'm just like, well, I don't know if I did enough, or I don't know if this is going to work, or I don't know if I'm going to be compensated for my loss, or and fortunately for me, it worked out really, really well. Insurance company, it was awesome to work with. I was super happy how things turned out, and looking back at it, it's like, when I start over, because I during this process, I was already switching from N scale to HON3, and I was taking the layout down, and I was already switching over. I was starting over pretty much. Mm-hmm. And right then I told myself, this is never happening again. I'm going to be, God forbid this happens again, but if it does, I'm going to be ready for it. I'm going to have the spreadsheets, I'm going to have the photographs, I'm going to have everything ready to go for, especially with the HON3, because all my locomotives are brass.
Yeah, that's going to be highly collectible, I would think.
Yeah, everything's there's a little bit more money involved now. I mean, there's less stuff, but there's more money. So it's fortunately, I don't have 250 locomotives to document. Right now, I have, since this has happened, I think I have about 30 brass locomotives in HON3, and that's a far cry from the 250 some odd N scale locomotives I had.
Oh yeah, big time.
So
So what will the process be then? Are you going to go ahead and take photos of everything and document the price that you paid for everything and keep a spreadsheet on hand for that, just in
so the
case?
cool, yeah, I'm definitely doing that. Like I think I've collected probably almost 100 Blackstone freight cars, and they're super easy because there's only like 5 different styles of them, and they all have a price and they all have a photograph, and you can just put down one photo and how many pictures, how many you have, and you can get as creative as you want with this. But I found for my brass that brasstrains.com, they have a really cool collection guide type of a deal. I can't remember what they call it. You can actually set up your collection on their website, and you can print it off, and it gives you a real time value for what it is right now. You can add notes to what you paid for it, anything more you've done to it, but it automatically loads a stock photo of that model that you have, and they put it in your collection. It's really cool and really simple and easy.
Oh, that's cool. And that's on brasstrains.com, huh?
Yeah, brasstrains.com. I stumbled upon that, and I was like, wow, this is cool, because I just sat there and just went through the list of locomotives, like, because they have an archive of classic brass locomotives, brass that they've sold, and it's cool because as far as I'm concerned, they're kind of the price setter for the value of brass. They give you a trend on it too. That's like an up and a down, and a graph of where the prices have started and where they've gone to, and if they're going down or up or whatever. So it's kind of cool to give you a valuation on your collection, but it's also really great way to document your collection.
Right.
Really simple. It's already set up, and so you can just go there and point and click and add a few notes, and you can add your own pictures if you want. It's a really cool way to document your collection. Fortunately, or unfortunately, it's just for brass. I don't think you can add anything else in there, but it is nice to be able to have a go-to place that has that already set up. You don't have to make up your own spreadsheet or anything. It's already done. And then at the end, you have a whole list of what you've got and a final value, a current market value for what is there. You can add a value for what you've paid for it, or it's really, really cool.
Yeah,
really
that makes sense that people would want to do. That's actually a very good resource for people to think about if you have a brass collection, if you don't already know about that. So thanks. I'm glad to hear about that. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it comes in handy in more than just insurance stuff too. It's like, one of the things that I've always been worried about is, if something ever happened to me, what would my wife do with all this stuff? Instead, hopefully she just wouldn't give it away, but it would be really handy if she'd just go straight to that, pull up that list and be like, oh, this is what everything is. It's a list of everything. This is what it's worth. The other cool part about that is if you just wanted to quickly sell your collection, Brass Trains already knows what you have.
Right.
And they're buyers. They'll buy it all, and they just look at your collection and say, oh, this is how much we'll offer for you. And you can get rid of it right then, so it's not trying to get anybody to sell their collection, but you never know what's going to happen, I mean, you may need to, and it could be a really quick process for you for some quick money, or make it easier on your wife if something happens to you or your kids or anything, so.
Yeah, that's one of the things, kind of an aside here, one of the things that I've had conversations with people about is that what happens when you no longer need your collection,
right?
And because I've seen it. I have a very good friend out here, Dave Adams, who went through Jim Vale's entire layout and collection, and he was kind of almost like the executor of the estate when it came to the train stuff. And it was a full-time job for this guy. He's retired, thank goodness for him. Right. Well, I mean, in a way, thank goodness for him. But here's what would have happened. Jim has a daughter, and she didn't know anything about this stuff.
Right.
But Dave did. So instead of Kate's her name, instead of Kate giving it away for pennies on the dollar or just selling stuff or just getting rid of it, Dave actually got her a lot more because he knew what he was talking about. So what you're talking about is basically having a built-in Dave by having it on Brass Trains. So that's...
there's many reasons to do this, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of fun too, you know. I mean, if you sit there and really look at your collection and be like, "Wow, man, look what I've done," and you know, because I mean, having it all on the layout or all in boxes or whatever is one thing, and you know what you have or you have an idea. I mean, there's some things that I didn't even realize that I forgot I had. You know, I mean, I was like, "Oh, wow, that's cool," you know.
Adam, that's when train hoarding becomes a problem.
Yeah, yeah. There's it. I'm definitely guilty of that.
Yeah,
Definitely
I'm,
guilty of
I'm
that.
just giving you a hard time. You know that.
Right, right.
But
But you know, I mean, it's kind of it's. I think, I mean, it's another aspect of the hobby that you could be enjoyable if you make it enjoyable.
oh,
You know, it's kind
absolutely.
of.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at it kind of like I remember back when I was a kid collecting baseball cards. It's like, why do you collect them? Well, they're kind of fun to look at. You know,
Hmm.
I mean, you flip through them again. Well, this is even funner than that. You know, so especially if they're all in boxes, it's literally a collection that you're just storing. You
Yeah,
know,
and
go through it, document it, realize
I,
what you got. You know,
I think that collecting is definitely one of the facets of enjoying the hobby. I mean, I know
oh
people
yeah,
that all they do is collect and store stuff. They
right,
never run it,
right,
you know.
right,
So,
right.
but it's still cool. I mean, I fell prey to that once. I saw a pair of P42s. God, this was before I was doing anything. They were N scale, and I had been videotaping the real P42s out on the main lines. And I was at the train shop with a friend at the time, and I'm like, "Oh, these are cool." It was like $200 for the pair, right? They're Kato P42s N scale and in a set. And I'm like, "I want that," and I bought them. I had nowhere to run them. I had nothing, but I bought them because I thought they were cool. So I get that, collecting stuff. Now I since have place to run them, and I've since put DCC and sound in them, so I'm
Yeah,
enjoying them more now. But at the time, I was just a simple collector and had nothing else to do with it. So
right.
okay, well, this is all really good information, and I think that a lot of people watching are going to be learning a lot from your experience. So thanks for sharing it. What do you think are some of the things people should look out for, and what do you think maybe some recommendations you could give to people?
I think the best recommendation is just to keep a good documentation of what you have. You know, they even with the personal property, because it's kind of, if you think about it, it's just kind of a lump collection. Just they just kind of throw it all together and give it a basic value. That what they do after that is depreciate it. So if you have stuff that's 10 years old, they're going to depreciate it a lot. You know, I mean, if you have stuff that's 1 year old, it's not going to be depreciated much. But you can't just say everything's 1 year old, because they're going to be like, "Oh, you're telling me you just spent $20,000 in the last year on trains? How did you do that?" I mean, there's lots of red flags that can be thrown, you know, and so a good documentation of what it is, how much you spent on it, a photo even, you know, is definitely your best friend when something like this will happen. And you know, and then just always making sure that your insurance covers what you want it to cover, you know, because insurance does change. Like it's always good to keep shopping for insurance. Make sure that you're always up getting the best coverage for the least amount of money, and and just making sure that it's always satisfactory to what your expectations are. That's, I think so many people just think, you know, buy insurance, because I was one of them. They just buy insurance to because they have to have it. You
Hmm.
know, it's like it's something that you have to have, so they just buy it. It's just a payment. You know, it's like, well, I got to pay this. I might as well. Well, it is, but when you need it, you better hope it's what you need. You know, it is something you have to have. Just make sure it's what you need. And I think that that's the best advice I could give.
So make sure you have sufficient coverage for your collection. That
Yeah.
does make a lot of sense. And I know a lot of guys do have collections that exceed half the price of their homes, or even
Oh
exceed the
yeah.
price of the home. So,
Right.
and
Right.
I would think that if you were a renter, you'd want to have renter's insurance. I know that
Oh, absolutely.
we're talking about homeowners insurance here, but they have renter's insurance too. So if you rent a place and have a collection that you store at your rented place, that makes a lot of sense to have that as well.
Right,
So,
right. I mean, I've got a couple different styles of collections. I mean, I got all my model trains, and I've got a classic car collection in the garage. You know, so
right.
it's like I have to have a couple different types of insurance, because I mean, for example, on the classic cars, they're not covered under homeowners insurance because they're auto insurance. They are covered under homeowners insurance if they're not operable. So you could have, like, say, my '66 Mustang, perfect done. It's beautiful. If I had it on blocks, if I just had it blocked up with the tires off, that's considered not operable, and my auto's insurance wouldn't cover it, but my homeowner's would. See, there's weird little things like that you just got to make sure that you're covered and you're following the right lines, because insurance is a business as well, and as much as they want to make sure you're covered, they also need to make money too. So, you know, unfortunately, it's one of those lucrative deals where they're going to try to get out of paying you if they can, and that's why there's all these little, ways to get out of paying you, that you just need to make sure that you're within those guidelines and doing what you need to do.
Yeah.
So you are covered. There's no questions.
Yeah, that's why we call that stuff fine print, right? Because it's stuff
Yeah.
people would gloss over, and they're like, well, wait a minute. There's this little thing right here that says we don't have to pay for that. So
Right.
I think you're very generous, though, when you said that they want you to be covered, but they also have to make money. I think it's the call me a cynic, but I think it's the other way around. They want to make money, but they also have to cover you, because you've paid, right?
Right, and I feel that way too. I mean, after dealing with this, I have a little bit better outlook on it because of how well they did take care of us,
Yeah.
and so I'm super grateful for that. And that also depends on your insurance. So it's like a reputable insurance company, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
You really do, and if I was paying for some cut rate low insurance, the stuff that's out there just to say you have insurance, this would have been a different story, man.
I'm
This
sure
have
it
been
would.
a completely different story.
I'm sure it would.
So
Well, Adam, here's the thing. I'm really glad for your sake that you had an insurance company that took care of you, because as bad of an experience as it would have been, and I can only imagine. I'm a pretty empathetic person, and I can't imagine even my modest collection seeing it, in a 2 inches of bad water.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
just. I don't know that
it's disheartening.
yeah, I don't know that it would, really cause me as much anguish as it did you, because I don't have a very big collection. It doesn't mean, I think, as much to me as it did to you. So having to go through the bad experience, having the good insurance on the other end of that, sounds like it was really nice, because it could have been, like you said, way worse.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So.
especially since I have a business working on other people's stuff. I mean, I had probably 15 brass locomotives on my workbench. Fortunately, they were on my workbench. I mean, they're not going to be in a box on the floor.
Right.
But all these thoughts run through your head. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to have to pay all these people. I'm going to have to buy all their models. I'm going to have to, obviously insurance would have taken care of it, but it's just one of those things, man. It's like, how well do you value your sleep? Because there's a couple nights that I was up just sitting there tossing and turning, thinking, this sucks, dude. This is not going to end well. Now knowing what I have now, have been through it, and knowing that I have a really good insurance company that does care, that actually did take care of me, or whether it was because I chose to have that type of insurance or not, it definitely made sleeping a lot easier.
Well, it sounded to me like you were also very reasonable about it too. Like you're willing to work with them in trying to value the stuff and being willing to take less than what you probably realize it's really worth.
Right.
So that probably helped them make that decision too.
I mean, I think being reasonable is definitely probably in your best interest, because it's just like anything. They're going to treat you the same way you treat them. I'd hope, I would hope, and I think that if you have a good quality insurance, it's going to be that route. It's going to go down that route. And I probably, by doing what I did and saying, hey, I'm just going to, here's an average price,
Right.
Did I make anything? No. Did I lose anything? Maybe.
Probably some, huh?
Probably some, but if I would have gone through, and if I would have been a stickler about it and said, this is what this is worth and this is what this is worth, they might have given me the full depreciation on everything.
Right, which is half or something like that?
Yeah, it can be up to 50%.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of gives and takes, I think. And that's, like I said, I think that's the human side of it. I don't think that's necessarily a company. I think that's just who you deal with.
Yeah.
And that being said, if you're dealing with somebody and you don't think that it's being fair, trust me, he's not the only one that works for the company, and you can ask for somebody else, and so keep in mind that don't just go with one guy. If he's not treating you right, or if he's not doing what you think he should be doing, or you need somebody else, ask your insurance to get somebody else out there, because trust me, he's not the only one that works for the company.
Right. And I would think also, in the case of just in the context of what we're talking about here, which is model train collections, there are probably a lot of people who don't understand collections like that.
Right.
Because
right.
even just me, I've talked to people and they're like, oh, toy trains. Like, no.
Right.
These are precision scale models. And in many cases, like your brass stuff you're talking about is highly collectible stuff. If someone doesn't understand that, they'll think, well, what's the difference between this and like a Tyco train set? They don't know. So if you can find someone that at least kind of gets that, that probably would help too.
I think that most insurance companies definitely understand the collectible value of stuff. I mean, how much were Beanie Babies worth at one time? You know, I mean, I can imagine a trailer fire of those things going up and having an insurance collection on a bunch of little stuffed animals. I think that most insurance companies understand what collectibles could be, but that's also why there's all sorts of little loopholes and this and that in there to try to get out of paying that kind of stuff. And definitely, you know, I lucked out because the guy that I dealt with as far as the resolution of my collection or my personal property understood. He did understand model trains. I got lucky. What are the chances of that?
Right.
I mean, that just goes to prove how big the hobby really is.
Yeah.
You know, and he did understand model trains pretty well. And I don't think he was a model railroader, but he'd been around it enough to know that, this could be something really, really big, you know. And so I mean, I couldn't have been more fortunate with the outcome and the process of my insurance claim.
Right.
And, you know, I really hope that anybody who ever is in a situation like this can have the same experience that I did, but don't plan on it and be prepared for something worse, because being prepared is going to be, I mean, with anything in life, being prepared is going to help 100%, you know, and so having a little bit of an understanding and knowing what your insurance limitations are, and either upping them, or, you know, just make your insurance yours. It's very personable. You can design it to exactly what you need, and there's ways to do it, you know, so.
All right. Well, I mean, that sounds really great, and it sounds like good advice to me. So I want to thank you, Adam, for taking the time and talking with us today. I think that the information that you've provided here is really good, and I think it'll probably help a lot of people who either are going through the same problem that you had, or you never know. I mean, you don't want to wish it on anybody, but things can happen at any time, especially in this crazy world we're living in.
Oh, man.
So I'd like to invite you, though, if you're ever interested, to come back on. I think that a lot of people might be interested to hear about your career on the railroads, stuff like that. So you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, anytime you'd like.
Cool. All right. Well, that'll do it for this time. I'll talk to you all next time. Thanks again, Adam.
Have a good one.
Thanks again, Adam, for sharing your experience with us. I think our conversation raises a lot of very good points. The most obvious point, to me, is that it's a very good idea to document your model collection just in case something bad happens. If you're just starting out, it'll be a lot easier. But even if you have a huge collection, if it's not documented and something happens, you might not be able to recover much of its monetary value, because insurance claims should be accompanied by as much documentation as you can possibly provide. It also behooves you to read through your insurance policy carefully to be sure that you understand what is and isn't covered, and what documentation is required to make a claim. That way, you can be sure that at least the monetary value of your collection or layout will be able to be recovered if something catastrophic happens to it. You may find out that you need an additional rider if your collection is valued over a certain amount, or if it contains highly collectible pieces, like Adam said, that are likely to be stolen. I want to reiterate that Adam is not an insurance salesman or anything like that, and his experience dealing with his insurance company might be different from yours. The information in this program is being provided simply as a basic introduction to an important topic that anyone who plans to build a layout, or who has a layout or a large model collection, for example, should seriously consider. So, what do you think? Did we forget to mention anything? Have you had a similar experience? Maybe you work in the insurance industry and you'd like to chime in. Comments promoting insurance companies won't be approved in the comment section below, but if you have additional information, please comment below. If you're an insurance expert and know all about the different types of policies or would like to be considered as a guest for a future episode that covers this topic in more detail, you're welcome to contact me at podcast@tsgmultimedia.com. As always, I invite you to support this channel by visiting patreon.com/tsgmultimedia. Thanks for watching and make it a great day.